Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Cordamt, and in this video I'll be doing my review for the alpha version of Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy. So before we begin, there's a couple of things I want to mention because they are going to be relevant for the entirety of the video. The first one is, this review is going to be based on a full playthrough that I did of the alpha version of the game. In case you guys are interested, I have that in my channel. I am going to leave a link up here for the playlist in case you want to check it out. It is my first playthrough, so it's first impressions over everything. But yeah, this review is based on that. Now, the alpha, this alpha edition, is not the entire game in an alpha state. It is a section of the game in alpha state. It's not the start, it's not the end. I would say it's a little bit after the beginning of the game. You can either start at level 3 or level 5, depending on a choice you make when you begin the game. Like in the menu, it's not even gameplay at that point. You can just choose one scenario or the other and you start level 3 or start level 5. I would say it's a fairly decent sized chunk of gameplay. One in which I was able to experience and experiment with a lot that Dark Heresy has to offer. Like, I got to meet and play with multiple different unique characters. I made a couple of quests, did a variety of combat encounters. So I was able to explore a lot that the game has to offer in this alpha version. I will try to make this review as spoiler-free as possible, and what I mean by this is I'm not going to be going into details of any quest or details about NPCs or characters or spoiling combat encounters, but I will be showing things on screen, okay? So I'm going to be talking about companions, I'll be talking about new features or gameplay mechanics, and I will be showing those on the screen, so some things might get spoiled, just so you guys know ahead of time. I played my playthrough of this alpha version was done in daring difficulty, so it was the highest difficulty available at this time. So currently we have custom, normal, and daring. I didn't want to mess around with custom. I prefer to just go with the developer preset and see how it is. I would fully expect that in the final release, just like what you have in other Owlcat games, you would have something like story difficulty, easy, normal, daring, hard, and then unfair. I think they did the same thing with Rogue Trader as well. And by the way, I may make some references and comparisons between this game and Rogue Trader. If you don't know what Rogue Trader is, it is the previous game from Owlcat Games. And these games are very similar, okay? They will feel very familiar in a bunch of different aspects, which I will also cover at that point. So, if you've never seen it, I will still try to keep this review more focused on Dark Heresy and not rely too much on Rogue Trader. Something else that's important for what I'm going to be saying during the course of this video. I also tried to keep this alpha experience spoiler-free for myself. I know it sounds silly, but what I mean by this is I explored the quests, I did all of the combat encounters, exploration, all that stuff, but I tried to keep the reading of the lore, the dialogues, the quests, all that stuff to a minimum, okay? Because I want, when I get the full release on my hands, I want to be able to sit down and take my time reading through the entire dialogue, get to know the lore of the world, all those things at my own pace. And I want to experience it for the first time, okay? I don't want to start the final release after already knowing a full section of the game ahead of time. I don't like that idea. But yeah, that's what I wanted to get out of the way. And now let's start with the actual review. So to begin, my overall impression of Dark Heresy is positive. I think the Warhammer 40k setting is very well represented in this game. I think the lore of the game is spot on, or the lore of the universe is spot on. I think the combat is enjoyable. I think it's well made. Again, a comparison to Rogue Trader. If you've played Rogue Trader before, or if you know how it is, you know what to expect for Dark Heresy. I would say the combat feels very familiar. I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. It's not like it's copy-paste, but when you are playing the game, you will definitely feel that it's very similar to Rogue Trader. You will have the same style of UI, you will have some abilities which are the same style of abilities, some spells are the same, and then you can also have some other things which might even have the same name, but they might work differently in this game. You even have some abilities which have the same name as they do in Rogue Trader, but they are now a toggle option, for example. But I'll cover this in more detail when I actually go into combat. But yeah, overall, I think the combat encounters are enjoyable. I think the quests were interesting. It led me to explore different areas with a purpose. These different areas felt like they make sense in its own setting, and they also make sense together with the other areas. So it was enjoyable to explore these different areas for the purpose of these different quests. And we also have some new features which I'm very excited to go over, because I think in terms of new features, there's some really cool things, and then there's like one which I'm not really sure about yet. But yeah, we're gonna look at those in more detail when we go over each topic. So, I have some stuff written down here. I'm gonna try and follow my chain of thought from what I wrote down, and then I'll probably just go, off script and ramble on a little bit about things that I remember. So, in terms of quests, we have a decent amount of quests in this alpha version. You can see them here, all of them. And this is at a reasonably advanced state of the alpha. I am intentionally presenting this review at the start on this state because I want to show the level up screen, and I cannot show it if I don't have somebody able to level up. But I'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, we have a decent amount of quests showing here. Some of them complete, some not complete. Again, very similar to what you would see in Rogue Trader. I do think that these quests were interesting. I think they were not mindless quests where you just go and do something that feels random. I do think there's a background and there's a reasoning for the quests and why you are doing these quests and why the people you meet have these interests and have these quests to give you. So I do think that the world setting ties in very well with the quests you are doing in this game. I also think they feel unique. Like, I didn't feel like any quest was generic. I didn't feel like the quests were too similar between them. I think they had their own purpose, and that showed quite well during the gameplay. It does feel like our decisions and our interactions with the quests, with the NPCs we meet, for the purpose of the quests, I do think these things matter. You definitely feel like your decisions have weight in what you are doing, and you can fully expect these decisions to... They might not all have some consequence later in the game, but you definitely feel like you're gonna have a consequence right now or later in the game. So I do think they did a very good job in making that weight felt when you are, making your choices through the quests you do. On the not so positive side, I do feel like some of these quests were confusing, and I did feel lost a lot of the time. So if you see my playthrough, you will definitely find some sections in which I don't know where to go next. I feel lost. I'm trying to go over the journal to see if I can get some information. The journal doesn't help that much a lot of the time. And there was even a point where I had to interrupt my playthrough. I had to go ask for help in the Owlcat Discord, seeing if other people knew how to handle it, because I just could not progress. So one of those things is tied to a mechanic that they decided to add, and I believe this is unique for Dark Heresy. It might have existed in Rogue Trader, I don't remember. Which is something that, to me, I just get reminded of The Witcher 3, in which you are investigating a quest, and you will have something like, oh look, there's footprints over here. So you go, you click on the footprints, and then you have to follow a trail, right? Which, to me, is not the most interesting mechanic in the world, but, you know, it's passable. But there were times where you had to follow multiple footsteps, and then they disappeared, and then you have to talk to a specific NPC that's not very clearly, I don't want to say highlighted, but it's not immediately obvious for you that you need to speak to that NPC. So I was just walking around aimlessly trying to look for any kind of clues, and there weren't any. So I had to have somebody tell me, you need to speak with that guy to progress the quest. So this is just a single example. There were more examples where I kind of felt lost and not knowing where to go next. To note, again, this is an alpha version, so take this with a grain of salt. But I did have some meaningful bugs in the game. I would even say game-breaking bugs, which soft-lock my progression. So one of them was tied, and this is just something I believe happened, I don't have confirmation from devs, tied to something from here, which is a new mechanic which I'm excited to talk about in a bit, but I did something in this new feature, I think a little bit early in the campaign, and I think that broke quest progression later on. So I reached certain points in my quests where I had to talk to somebody, and you can see it right here. For example, well, not in this save game, but I can show it later, I think. I would get to a point where the quest would say, go and question this person, and you would go there and you would get nothing. There would be no update, there would be no new dialogue, there would be nothing for you to do. And I went around, I did everything, and nothing progressed. And I confirmed that it was supposed to progress, it just didn't. So I basically got soft-locked at that point. Thankfully, I do have some experience with Allcat games, so I also installed Toybox, and this was actually able to, I was able to give myself a necessary item in order to be able to progress in the story and complete the alpha. Otherwise, I would not be able to do it. So yeah, there are bugs in the game. That one was particularly nasty because it broke my progression. And if you don't know about Toybox, or if you don't know what you're looking for, you would probably just give up on playing the game at that point. Allcat games are kind of known for having a lot of bugs at the start. I did not play the Pathfinder games on release, so I played them in a stable state. I did play Rogue Trader on release, and it was horrible. It had a lot of bugs. Thankfully though, they were, I think, most of them fixed, and it is now a very pleasant experience that I can definitely recommend to anybody who likes CRPGs or just Warhammer 40k games. It's a very, very good game. An excellent game, I would even say. So yeah, there are some bugs here which I fully expect for the final release to not have. Now, to talk about a new feature which I liked quite a bit. Going back to this screen which I showed before, we have our journal, but we now also have our Inquisitorial Journal. And what this is, from what I could gather in this alpha version, is that as you progress in the game, you are going to have different cases to solve. You know, kind of like Sherlock Holmes. And these cases, you will get them, and initially you're going to have like something like this, right? You're going to have the reason for this case, and then nothing else. But as you explore, as you progress through the game, as you speak with different NPCs, and you explore the dialogue and the quests and areas, you will find clues in the world, you will uncover new conclusions by speaking to people. There's just a lot of things that you can do in the game that will unlock more knowledge about this case. And it's represented in this diagram, which I think is a very cool representation. You know, if you've seen any kind of mystery TV show or movie or whatever, you've seen this kind of diagram like on a whiteboard with red wires. This does something similar. Is it kind of a, I wouldn't say cliche, but like a very expected thing in this kind of environment, yes, it still works very, very well. So even though, as I said before, I was not focusing intentionally on dialogues, I wasn't focusing on these cases intentionally, I can tell that this is something that is a very nice feature and one that I'm very much looking forward to explore in the actual final release and really put my time and dedication into understanding everything that's happening. Because, like I said, as you go through the game, you will get more information. You might have information about a specific character, and then you can even have some more information about them relevant to the case. You may have certain situations where you can come to certain conclusions. You can have other situations in which you will have conclusions, but as you progress through the game, you might find contradictions, so you can remove those conclusions. And you might even get to a point where you found everything you had to find, and you still don't have like a conclusive result. You know, you're not gonna finish the case finding everything, and then the game will tell you, okay, so you found all the pieces, this is the result. No. You will have situations where you found all the pieces, and I did feel this, but it is still not clear from everything you see here what is the actual truth behind the case. And you have to come to your own conclusions based on what you experienced, based on what you saw, what you read, and I think that's a really nice touch. So, the reasons why I like this a lot, it looks cool. I like the whole investigation aspect of this gameplay mechanic. One of the more important things, I think it makes you more tied and invested in the game, in the world setting, in the lore, in the characters, because if you know that whatever you are doing can give you some kind of relevant information, some relevant context to the case you are solving, at least speaking for myself, I am a lot more interested in actually seeing what people are saying and trying to keep things in my memory to then later try and apply on reaching these conclusions, contradictions, blah blah blah, and eventually also reach a verdict, because you may find a lot of stuff, but then when it's time to actually make a decision, you have to decide, and you are going to have multiple different options. Again, depending on the things you find, you still have to pick the one you think is correct. So really, really cool thing, really very nice addition to the game. I think this was probably my favorite addition to this game, especially because, again, I've played Rogue Trader, so a lot of Dark Heresy is familiar to me. This is definitely not. This is definitely something completely new, fresh, and in my opinion, a very, very good addition. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out in the final release, and how it plays out during the course of the game. Like, how many cases will you have to solve? For example, in this... Did I find a bug? The back button is not working. Ooh, I broke it. Okay, wait. I broke the game. Yeah. Okay, so in the alpha release, we have 2 cases to solve. This one I think I completely messed up. And this one I did take some more attention in doing. And what I noticed was that at the end of the alpha, you get like a summary of what you did. You can think about like the ending slides of Pathfinder or Rogue Trader or whatever, in which my cases were laid in front of me and they would talk about the conclusions and what happened. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if you get these right, if you get these wrong. And also, something very interesting which made me think about it is that, and this might not be obvious to you when I'm explaining this, but I'll give a brief example. In this particular, in both cases, you get to a point... Oh god, I broke it again. You get to a point where you have to make your decision, and you basically have to say, the responsible party is this one or that one. There's nothing that says that you need to be honest. Okay? So you might have found all the clues, you may know exactly what the real cause is, you can still choose something else. So if it's in your own interest that, let's say, a specific party remains in play in the game and you want to mess up another party, you can do it with these conclusions. I cannot tell you right now how much that changes or affects the game, because I don't know. In this alpha version I did not get to see that, but you can definitely tell that that's something that you can do. And more interestingly than that, when I finished the alpha, there was also a survey from Allcat Games which went over a couple of questions, and one of them said something like, what are the elements you value the most on your inquisitorial cases? And one of the options was choosing the outcome to my own interests, not necessarily because it's true. So if they are mentioning this, then definitely there will be consequences for the choices you make in these cases, which I find to be freaking awesome. And you know, dealing with the consequences, figuring out if something really is a consequence or if there's a contradiction and stuff like that, it's just very well done. I would say the UI is also very cool. You can move things around to display it in whatever way you want. It feels very, you know, a mystery show type of vibe. Very cool. And the only downside I've seen to this UI is that sometimes some elements can spawn like on top of others, and at times you may have some difficulty, like, oh, there's something underneath this. It was quite rare, okay, but it can happen. Alright, that's my favorite new feature in the game, just so you know. Now let's go on to talk about our companions. Now, companions play out much the same way here than you would expect in any other CRPG or Rogue Trader, or if you've played Pathfinder, you know, similar stuff. Let me just drink some water. Okay, I had to drink some water. So, you're gonna have different companions. All of them are unique. They all have their own personalities. They will have interactions during dialogue sections. They may have their own opinions about the quests you are doing, and they may interject in that sense. You have party banter, as you would expect. They have, I believe, their own set of specific abilities. I'll give a very quick example. You have this lady right here, Epion, which is a chirurgeon. Oh god, I did break the UI of my game. What the hell? Yeah. She's a chirurgeon, and she has this claw hand, you see? I think they call it like a scalpel hand instead of a regular hand. So she has abilities you can choose when you level up that will say something like, if somebody moves past her, she can make a free attack of opportunity with her claw. That's something you will not have on other characters. It's specific to her, it's unique to her. So I do like that. But yeah, they have their personalities, they have their own quest lines, which you can also do. In this alpha version, the more relevant one is from this guy right here, the Eldar, which is Larthir. You have new types of characters and new races, again, comparing it to Rogue Trader. Like, you have Eldar, you did not have it. You kinda had it in Rogue Trader, but you have a more typical one here. You have a new race, which are the Kroot, as a companion also. And you can also play with my personal favorite, Ogrins. Ogrins are these massive beings which are just freaking amazing. I love them in Darktide. I think here they're very fun as well. So, yeah, you have these companions. They're all pretty cool to use, I would say. They all feel mostly unique. There is one which is still unique, but I just didn't find that interesting, which is actually the one that's not in the party right here. It's a soldier specializing in burst fire. Out of all of them, he was the one which felt the least interesting. Everything else, honestly, felt really good. Like, the Ogren has its own role. He's a warrior, he's a fighter, so you want him in front. He's big. He can even act as cover for people behind you. If you've played with the Space Marine Alpha in Rogue Trader, it's a similar effect. You want to use him to take the attention of the enemies, to deal a lot of AoE damage, interrupt them, because there's a new mechanic called concentration, which I will get into in a second. So very, very fun to use. My favorite character by far in this alpha version is this Ogren. Very cool. We have this one here, which is a soldier. So it's a baseline soldier, but it is a Chirurgeon. So it's part of her background. I think, I don't know if it called this like just background, but yeah. She's a soldier Chirurgeon, so she specializes in medicines, like a combat medic. And she will have abilities which are suited for a combat medic. She may heal you, she may remove damage over time effects, she can buff you to give you more defenses, more movement points. And she is also a very fast and nimble character. You move around the map quite easily. So I loved, personally, to pair her up with my Ogren, kind of have the Ogren move around, do his stuff, and then she would kind of follow around, buff him up, keep him healthy, use AoE abilities to help out as well. So very fun to use as well. I did not actually expect it, but it was very fun to use. Your main character you have no control over. You cannot create a new character in the alpha version. You already come with the preset. It comes as an officer, which is personally one of my favorite archetypes. I know some people find them too powerful or don't like their mechanics. I like them a lot. It's an officer. And then everybody can also have a specialization, which is really cool. Like, she's specialized in tactical movement. That's why she's so nimble and she can move around so cool, so well. Like this guy, for example, has a heavy armor specialist to keep your people safe. There's just a bunch of different things which are very cool. And I do think the presets they made for the alpha are well done. I did not feel like any of the characters was like... was not thematic or did not work very well or not interesting. I think all of them are quite well done, except that other guy, which is just like a... It's more of an uninteresting soldier, let's say. He's not necessarily bad, but he's just not as interesting. But yeah, it's an officer, very well done. He does what you would expect him to do with some more stuff, which is talking about morale, which I will talk about in a bit. Very effective character, very fun to use. You also have a Psyker Companion, which is a Pyromancer, so huge AoE damage, a lot of damage over time with burn, just a bunch of cool things you can use. You have your Veil Degradation, which can modify what happens when you cast spells, similar to what you have in Rogue Trader also. So you would think about him as a spellcaster, in essence. And he is also a attack debuff specialist. So he's actually going to debuff everybody that he hits with his spells due to a couple of mechanics we're also going to talk about in a bit. Fun to use as well. You have the Wayseeker, Lartir here, a new archetype in the game. What I found from him was very mobile, a lot of support for the party, offensive spells, offensive abilities. We also have something new in this game, which is similar if you've played Fallout 1 or Fallout 2, you know, old games from way back. You have precise shots, or precise attacks. You can actually target a specific area of the enemy, including their weapon. I didn't actually test the weapon shot, I don't really know what it does, but it's not gonna show here, because this is a friend. Can I actually target like an NPC? Okay, it doesn't show because they're not counted as enemies. But each of these, if you hit, it's going to have a different type of penalty. So you can injure their torso, they will get a debuff. If you injure their arms, they're going to have a different debuff. You can break their concentration, which again, I'm going to cover in a bit. If you go for their legs, you can even immobilize them. And then if you go for the head, the neck, or the eyes, you will have different types of effects, and you can even blind them, you can bleed them. There's a bunch of things you can do with this as well, which I also found to be a very cool addition. And this guy is kind of specialized on, he has some stuff to use with that. So just a very fun mobile unit, which is a lot more supportive than what you would think, at least in my opinion when I picked him up. And finally, you have this crude fellow over here, which is an operative sniper. So nothing too out of the ordinary. Give him a sniper rifle, he has some operative abilities, he wants to play around with exploits, he wants to debuff his enemies, but then he also has a bird friend, which he has... I can't show on his portrait, sadly, but you can use his bird friend to go and peck at the enemies, and it's gonna apply bleed, and it can even buff your entire party with some other mechanics. So, very, very cool companions, very cool characters, well built, thematic, fun to use, and also effective to use. What else do I have to say about the companions? I think that's basically it. They're just a positive. I don't find any negative for any of these companions. Even the other guy, the burst soldier, there's not really a negative. He's just not as special as these guys are right here. Okay, so to follow up on this, let's talk about combat. So combat, again, is similar to what you have in Rogue Trader, but I will go over it here as well. It's turn-based combat only, there's no real time with pause, it's only turn-based. I want to mention that every battle that I fought in the entire alpha version of the game, it never felt like a filler fight. Every single fight felt like it was thought out, and there was a reason for it. You weren't just, you know, moving on the map and then, oh, you found 3 goblins, fight. No. It was tied to quests, it was tied to certain NPC interactions. There was always a reason for the fights you were having, and that felt good. And also, the battle encounters themselves were well thought out. So it's not just fighting in an open area without anything. You're gonna have to leverage verticality, you need to use cover to your benefit, you need to use line of sight to your benefit, and you may even use other things, like for example, let's say there's a pillar over here which you can break to fall on this area and kill people. You can do that. You may have certain interactables in the fight which change the course of the battle, like something that's constantly demoralizing you, or something that can power up a powerful effect. All those things. So it does feel like the combat encounters are thought out to be a specific experience, more so than just killing people on a random field. So I did like that. Talking about these other things, they call these secondary objectives. So from what I could see, most, if not all, of the fights I fought, the more meaningful ones, let's say, they all had secondary objectives. Now, in my opinion, I think the idea behind having these secondary objectives is good, but to me at least, I think it's one of two things. So first, if they want to keep them, and I fully believe they will keep them, they need to be thought about a little bit better. They need to be a little bit better balanced. And so overall, I found them to be mostly like a hindrance or an annoyance, more so than something that I can use to leverage things to my advantage. And there are two clear examples that come to my mind. One of them is regarding the concentration mechanic, which I think the encounter uses and abuses to the point where you have to constantly focus on that secondary objective instead of just fighting. It gets to be a little bit too much. And then there's another fight which seems to have a secondary objective which is meant to help you, but in reality it just takes way too long for it to do anything. It requires you to do a lot of things like going out of your way to interact with things. it just does not help you. So it's something that the game suggests as being helpful, but you're actually hurting yourself if you go for them. So yeah, I found these things to mostly be something of a hindrance, and I generally found myself having more success just straight up ignoring them. I think the main exception was probably like one of the last fights where there was something that if I did not do, I would just lose. So yeah. But okay, with that, I think I've spoken enough about concentration. Let's actually talk about what it is. So for my characters, I have not yet found somebody having a concentration skill. It may exist, it may not. I don't actually remember if I saw any talents or abilities which said that. But your enemies definitely do. So, a brief example. If you have an enemy that wants to throw a frag grenade at you, they need to concentrate for a couple of rounds for that. So what I mean by this is, in Rogue Trader, if you want to throw a grenade, you would just... do I have anybody with a grenade? Yeah, I do. You would just click the grenade, click on the ground, and it would blow up. For your characters, that's what happens. For the enemies, at least the ones I saw using grenades, they had to basically signal their intent during their turn, at which point they would, they would say, I'm gonna throw a grenade over here, and then in the turn order, you would see that like 5 turns later or something, that would have actually happened. So they are concentrating on that effect for a number of turns or rounds, and then the effect occurs. And what they want you to do with this is, you have abilities. Let me see if I can find one. You have abilities which break concentration. So you'll see right here, disrupts target's concentration. And if you can do it, then you effectively negate that effect. And I'm using the grenade as an example. There are many different examples. There are people trying to shoot specific parts of your body. There are people trying to buff their allies, giving them extra turns, specific combat mechanics for unique encounters, stuff like that. There's just a bunch of concentration effects, and the way you have to handle them is you want to break their concentration, or else you are gonna have something very bad happen to you, because those effects are, generally speaking, a lot more serious than just a random attack that an enemy can do during the course of battle. Some encounters rely heavily on this concentration mechanic. There is, for example, a quest battle for one of your companions which relies on that heavily, and you are... give me a second, please. Okay, I am back, sorry. So, I think I was talking about the concentration effects. There is a specific encounter which relies heavily on that, and I don't really have an issue with the concentration mechanic, but it really depends on how they decide to apply it throughout the course of the game, and I'll explain why. If it's something that is used somewhat sparingly for powerful effects, as a brief example, there is a fight in the game, which I will not spoil, in which a character, or an enemy, has a concentration effect, which is a buff in which you will give an ally an extra turn, and during that extra turn they have 2 extra attacks and they can do a bunch of things, and it can just straight up kill multiple characters in your party. So you really don't want to let them do that, okay? So you would focus on breaking that target's concentration to make things better for you. And that, to me, is the type of use of concentration which I like. Something strategic in which you need to adapt in the fight to handle. If, however, and that companion quest battle I was talking about is a good example of this. If they abuse concentration to the point where every single enemy is concentrating on something, and if you don't break their concentration, something very awful will happen, and you may even lose the quest because of it. At that point, I don't find it very enjoyable. If we turn the fight into a fight of just, I need to constantly break concentration every single turn, multiple times per turn. It's not fun. I think it needs to be something to be used more sparingly. And to be honest, outside that quest battle, I didn't really feel like it was overwhelming in that way. So I think they're actually using it fairly well. But it remains to be seen how they use it in the final release. If they use it too much, it's gonna be a bad thing for the game, in my opinion. If they use it too little, it can still be kind of interesting, but at that point, why have it? So I think they have to find the right balance there to make concentration something worth having and fun to interact with. Some other things about combat. You have, like I said before, I think I said before, some mechanics you had in Rogue Trader, like run and gun, like shockwave shots, like for example, bulwark and stuff like that, or more specifically from the operative, which were active abilities where you spend an action point and you apply this on somebody. They are now toggle abilities in this game. So if you want to have the effect of this on, you toggle it on, and then you use whatever you need to use. And typically, it's going to have a cost. So the operative is not the best example of this, but the soldier is. So you will gain some kind of effect, but you need to pay 1 more AP for this specific attack. Okay, that's basically how they work. Is this a better thing or a worse thing? I can't really say. I don't think it's either better or worse. I think it's different. I didn't find myself thinking, oh, I wish this was active, or the fact this is a toggle sucks. I don't think that at all. I think it's just a different approach, and I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine using toggle abilities for the combat encounters in this game. What else? New abilities we talked about. Ah, right, the modifiers. We also have something very cool in the game, which is you have your abilities, right? You have your... Oh, I've talked about morale. Sec. We have modifications for our abilities. So not only do you have your typical stuff that you use, which are active abilities in the game, you can also modify them. So you have a couple of modifications which you can pick when you level up, and then you can apply them to your abilities. Let's say we have Ogren Pummel over here, which for 1 round target defense is reduced. What you can do is you take this, and you will see this is a modification applied to a negative effect. So you can apply this to any skill you have which applies a negative effect. So when you use something like, for example, in my case, Smash, it's gonna do the effect of Smash plus your modification. This is really cool. I think this makes combat even more interesting and building your characters even more interesting. It was just something that, again, I found really a good addition to the game. Never thought it was a bad thing to have. I think it just adds in a positive fashion to the game. So really cool to have the modifications now in the game as well. And everybody is going to have different modifications. You might have some unique modifications, like she's a Chirurgeon, so she has these. He's an Ogren, he's gonna have his own. The Kroot is gonna have his. So this is very cool, very unique. And that's kind of the name of the game here for a lot of things which I like in Dark Heresy. And it's everything feels like it's part of a nice little bundle. It's very thematic. It makes sense as a whole. It's not just generic stuff. Something which also adds to this, and we can look at it, for example, here in the level up screen. This is why I saved this. You no longer have... sorry. And I'm back, sorry. What I want to say is that when you are choosing your talents, I'm just skipping the abilities there, you will note that not only is it more tidy, where you can group by type or group by source, then you have Kroot, Operative, and Precise Attack Specialist, or you can just group by offense, survivability, support, and morale. You'll note you no longer have common talents here. So this is something that Rogue Trader had, in which it had like a large number of talents which were the same for everybody. That's gone. As much as I can tell, that's gone in Dark Heresy. So that helps even further make everybody feel more unique, which to me is a very, very big improvement. While we are talking about our level ups here, I can also show something else. So we have our abilities. These are active abilities which we already had. You can pick whatever you want. You can pick a talent, as you could again, as you always could, sorry. Another one here. And then you also have upgrades, which you also did not have in Rogue Trader. So what this means is when you pick an ability, whichever abilities you choose or you have already in your character, you can then upgrade. So something like, for example, this one here, before it would do this, after the upgrade, it's going to do something else. What I mean by something else typically means it did the same thing it did before, plus something else. Again, a very, very cool feature to have for building your characters, just making your abilities feel more unique. An example I have that's very easy to understand, the fighter, the Ogren, he has the Endure skill. Very basic skill, but very effective. And when you go for upgrading it, you can clearly see you have one option which is more offensive, you have one option which is more defensive, and you even have one option if it was an agility type fighter. So you can definitely customize and make your character unique by choosing the right upgrades for whatever you want to do. Very, very cool. Something that will also help people trying out builds, in my opinion, is we no longer have that wheel, that circle, to look over the different level ups from Rogue Trader. Instead, we have something more akin to what you have in Pathfinder. So, just like in Pathfinder, we now have this little chart where we can see, starting at level 1 all the way to 25. I'm not sure if if we're gonna have more levels. Don't take this for final. But we have this chart in which we can see clearly, on level 1, we will get a new feature. At level 2, new feature. At level 3, we get specialization and a characteristic. I forgot this one here. At level 4, ability and talent. At level 5, upgrade and talent. At level 6, modification. Right, so you can clearly see what you are going to get on each level up, and you can try to maybe plan according to that, or at least have a better notion of what to expect when you are finalizing a build. That's a very cool... to me, for example, this is an upgrade over what they had in Rogue Trade. I think it's much more visual and in a better way of what happens. You clearly know what you're going to get in a cleaner fashion. Right, now we have talked about this. I think the other new thing I want to talk about regarding combat is morale. So in Rogue Trader, you have ultimate abilities. You still have them here, and they work very much the same. So for example, the officer, very iconic, in Rogue Trader, if you get... what was the resource name, man? I forget. It was a party-wide resource, I think. My memory sucks. But yeah, I think you had a party-wide resource, and when it reached maximum, you would unlock ultimate abilities. And the officer, for example, would give an extra turn to somebody else so they could act and move. It's the same thing here. But the resource you have to handle to reach that ultimate ability is not party-wide, it is character-specific, and it's based on morale. So every character in the game during combat is going to have a morale meter. It starts at 0, it can go up to 10, or it can go down to -10. If you reach 10, you get your heroic act, your ultimate ability, the positive version. If you reach -10, you have the broken version of that ability. So again, as an example with the soldier here, if you look at abilities, we have Kill Shot, Heroic Act, and we have Fatigue Break, Desperate Measure. Okay, so this is the positive version, this is the negative version if you are broken or if you reach heroic status. So, you have different ways of gaining morale. If you do something that's meaningful in combat, you gain morale. If you kill enemies, you gain morale. I think if you also help your allies, you may gain morale. If you are hit, if you are in the presence of somebody much more powerful, or just other general effects from the combat encounter, they can also increase or decrease your morale, okay? And the same thing applies to your enemies. And it's really cool as a mechanic to work with that, because for example the officer, you can have several things, like for example this right here, voice of command. This will give an ally more morale. I have modifiers that if I use, for example with bring it down, gives more morale. I have wicked scorn from this unique character, which can also bring morale down on an enemy and increase your own. So you have different very fun ways and interesting ways to manipulate the morale, be it your own or the enemy, because if you also break their morale, they don't get the desperate act. Instead, what they do is they kind of just give up on the fight. They will fall on the ground, they will have no defenses until they kind of recuperate. And on the other hand, if they reach 10 morale, they will be more dangerous. So I think at a certain point you can even make builds for your entire party where you focus on breaking enemy morale and or increasing your own. The other very cool part about the morale is, if you've played Total War games before, you will know what I mean. You will have a meter, a bar, which shows on the top left when you are in combat with a percentage. And if you reach 100%, that means you vastly out-morale the opposing party, and if it gets to 100%, the fight is auto-won. You automatically win the fight. You don't have to go and chase around and kill every single little enemy. As long as you are able to break their collective morale, you win the fight. And this, again, also has some cool stuff applied. Like, for example, every fight is going to have an enemy commander. In your party, your main character is the commander. Let me see if I can actually show it here. No, sadly it does not show. But when the fight starts, you will see above saying like commander or something like that. And if you are able to kill their commander, you give them a significant penalty to their morale. So you can kind of play around with that and make combat more interesting by leveraging morale. I definitely did in my playthrough, and I had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, I think that covers combat, you know, abilities, unique new stuff, modifiers, modifications to your skills, unique companion mechanics, unique encounters. Combat overall, very positive experience. I guess the only real downside is the secondary objectives in combat encounters feel more like a hindrance or an annoyance, in my experience, in daring difficulty at least. And the concentration, we'll have to see how they handle it to see if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But overall, very, very good. Okay, so some more things to mention which I think are not as relevant as maybe the other stuff I've been talking about, but I think it's still cool to show because it is more for the people who have played Rogue Trader and have seen Rogue Trader, which is a difference. In my opinion, a positive difference, but I mean, I'm talking about the trade system, which in Rogue Trader it's a very unique system in which you basically don't have currency. What you have is influence or status with given factions, and if you have enough of that status and reputation, you can just purchase whatever you want. Over here you have something somewhat similar, in which you still have your, let's call it I don't know what they call this, reputation, status, I think it's reputation. Reputation, yeah. You have different factions and you're gonna have reputation. You have presence and rapport, which all of these factions, they're probably gonna be more in the final release, who knows. But what you do is you find a merchant, and if you want to buy equipment, you need to meet their requirements. Some stuff might be free in terms of reputation, like costing 0 reputations or 0 rapport and 0 influence or whatever it's called. And then you're gonna have stuff which costs some, right? So like here, you have something that costs 10 of that specific influence, 10 of that one, 10, and if you start going down for the more powerful stuff, you might find 50, 25, you know, what have you. So this is essentially a prerequisite for you to be able to purchase these items. But in Dark Heresy, you also have actual currency. Okay, they're called synths. You need these, and you can think about them as like gold coins, whatever. And you can sell trash items, which currently I have none. But you can sell trash items, you can sell actual items. They're all gonna have a cost associated to them. You can see it right here, what you would get for selling them. And then, you know, you get your currency, and then you can buy things with your money. Now, personally, I know this is the most old-fashioned system there is, but I think it works out very well, and I do think it's more interesting to manage this type of currency than just something that it's not static, but it doesn't change while you are interacting with the merchant. It will only change due to outside events, not really out of your control. You do affect how you gain those points, but it's not in the same way you would handle coins or this kind of money currency. So I do prefer that we have this. Not much else to talk about. Trade system pretty much very similar. The items themselves also kind of similar. You know, you have area attack weapons, you have burst weapons, single fire weapons. You have consumables like grenades, you have boosters, you have stuff to blow up things using demolition, you have multi-keys for lockpicking, machine right set to try and use tech cues on interactables. All those things very much the same, and the way you would think about skill checks in Rogue Trader or Pathfinder or whatever, it's very much the same thing here. It's just like on a different tab where you can see, you know, athletics, tenacity, resistance, blah, 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 which are used during dialogue sections or certain interactions, and some of them will also affect, obviously, combat, like resistance tests. Other than this, I can give a brief mention to puzzles. You know, you still have puzzles in the game. Some of them can be interesting, especially if you think about certain elements of the Inquisitorial Journal as puzzles. You definitely have some cool puzzles, but I wanted to show... but there are some other puzzles which can be a little bit weird, let's say, and I'm gonna give an example without trying to spoil anything. There is a specific area in this place here where you find something like a cogitator or a chair. I think it's a computer, this one here. If you go there, it's gonna start asking you for numbers. Okay, without spoiling anything else, that's it. It's gonna start asking you for numbers, and if you try to input numbers and you submit those numbers, it's gonna tell you that you have a couple of tries left. Okay, so you understand it's a code. Now, as you explore the area, you may find something which is going to give you the numbers that you need for that particular combination, but the numbers are not in the correct sequence. So you have two ways of doing this. Brute force one, which is the, well, semi-brute force one. The brute force one would be to try it right from the start. Apologies. And of course I got interrupted again. As I was saying, you can brute force the combination by going like 1 1 1 1 1, then 1 1 1 1 2, which is stupid, don't do that. Or then, when you find the combination, when you find the number, sorry, you can semi-brute force it, in which you're gonna try and input multiple combinations of the sequence of numbers until you get it right. Right? Because the terminal will give you 3 chances. You might fail, but if you quick save and you quick load, then you can do whatever you want, right? The god powers of the save and load. The real way to do it, or the way I think the devs intended to do it, is you find the numbers and then you find somebody in the entire area which is not highlighted in any specific way. It doesn't have any kind of tell sign. At least I did not notice at all the first time I came through here. But apparently if you interact with the guy and you help him, just because you want to, because there's no dialogue talking about it, nothing, the guy will actually tell you how you can solve that combination. And to me, that just feels a little bit weird. So the puzzle is fun, you find the numbers, then you have to find the sequence, but finding the sequence for the numbers, being behind, finding a random element in the entire map that you can interact with and he will tell you how, it's just not. I think if you want to do that, it would have to give you some kind of idea of how to solve it in a much more close by way, or in some way that you can identify, that you can find some help for the puzzle there. And at times I think this is how they mess up their puzzles. The idea for the puzzle can be good, but then the way they break apart the several elements is bad. And you know, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover regarding the puzzles. Now, I think I had made a quick save here. I don't remember why. I think I had made a quick save to show on the review. Was it because of the level ups? Maybe it was. It was because of the level ups. Okay, so that doesn't matter. I already showed the level ups. I wanted to show this tree over here. That's basically it. Other than that, I don't really have a lot more to cover. I'm sure that I am missing some things, both positive and negative, but I think let's close out this video by giving an overall summary of, you know, my experience with the game, what I think about the game, if I think it's a game to look forward to, that kind of thing. And again, I'll be as honest as I can based on my experience. I am someone that likes CRPG games a lot. So I have a channel dedicated to it, as some of you may know. If you don't, check it out. You might like it. I have played pretty much all CRPGs I can think of. They're my favorite style of game. Rogue Trader, being the closest comparison we have with Dark Heresy, is, I think, one of my favorite CRPGs. It's not my favorite one, but it's up there. It's especially because it's so unique in the setting of Warhammer 40k. So you have a lot of games based on Warhammer 40k, as you know. There are tons of games based on this universe. A lot of them suck. Some of them are actually quite good. But in terms of CRPG, like isometric CRPG, as we have in, you know, Baldur's Gate, Pillars of Eternity, all those kinds of older style CRPGs, to my knowledge, we don't really have one. Rogue Trader was the first one that I can think of, and I think Owlcat did a really great job with that. I also have a playthrough for that game in the channel. I have my own review of the game in the channel, and basically, I like it a lot. I think it's a really, really solid game. I think anybody that likes CRPGs should play that game, and anybody that likes the setting of Warhammer 40k should consider that game, because I know some people might not be interested in the CRPG genre and going over the math of the little numbers and then figuring out how to, you know, increase and decrease and blah blah blah. But still, it's a game that's so well made, not only in terms of gameplay and the combat, because that's also very, very satisfying and very unique, and I like it a lot, but the world setting, the lore, the way they present this, all of this to you, the way the NPCs speak, and the expressions they use, the quests you have, the management of the ship, it's all very, very well done, and it really makes it feel like a proper Warhammer 40k experience. And also to note, to my knowledge, I think I'm pretty sure Rogue Trader is based on a tabletop game. I think Dark Heresy is also, or maybe it's only based on novels. But if you are a fan of those, then I think you should consider the games. But yeah, I think Owlcat Games have been doing some really great games. They made Pathfinder Kingmaker, Wrath of the Righteous, Rogue Trader, and now they're working on Dark Heresy together with another project which is different. I know very little about that one. But I would say this one is on the same quality level that we've come to expect out of their games. I think if you've played their other games before, I think you will like the other games as well. So if you like Kingmaker, you'll probably like Wrath of the Righteous. If you like the Pathfinder games and you don't mind the shift from the more classical RPG, sword and shield and bow and arrow and arcane magic and priests, and you don't mind the shift to this more electronic and mechanical, futuristic sci-fi setting, then I think you should probably try Rogue Trader and Dark Heresy, because I think you will like it. As far as Dark Heresy goes, I think they made a very good job. I hope I'm not repeating myself, I might be. Again, I think if you've played their other games, this is of a similar quality in terms of what you can expect for playing the game as a whole. It is good to see that they are adding new stuff. It's not just another Rogue Trader game with a different name. They are actually adding new stuff. They are improving stuff. Even just this UI right here for the character, it's more polished. It looks better. There's better organization of different things. So they are improving these, let's call them minor things, but they're also adding completely different mechanics to the game, like the concentration mechanic, like the Inquisitorial Journal, which I love. I think it's going to be really, really cool. And, the quality of the quests, the areas, the combat encounters, the boss encounters, I think it's all very well done. And honestly, I think it's a game I could recommend. Well, let's keep in mind, this is an alpha version, okay? Things may change, but again, what I'm seeing here is not very different from what I saw in final release of Rogue Trader. So I don't think the game would change in such a fundamental way that it would not feel as it feels right now in the future. What I do hope that they do in the final release is obviously fix bugs. I also had the bug where I got stuck inside a texture, but there actually came out a hotfix just today after I finished playing the game, goddammit, that fixed that getting stuck inside a specific part of the scenario where I got stuck. And it also fixed one of the abilities from the other character that I did not use because the ability was bugged and I didn't know and I thought it sucked. So yeah, they also fixed that. So I hope for the final release they fix the bugs. I hope they take feedback from the people who play the game and not just focus on the really elitist players, because some players want these games to just be super hard and make the players suffer and stuff like that. I've seen players, people saying they will not play or they don't like Rogue Trader or Dark Heresy because you have officers in the game and they give extra turns and that's too overpowered and oh my god, that makes me effective and I don't like it. So they don't want to play the game anymore. There are certain characters and certain classes which are very powerful. Yes, if you played Rogue Trader and you've played with a Navigator, you will know what broken looks like. If you've played with a Pyromancer, you will know what broken looks like. I also have videos for that in the channel, by the way. That doesn't mean we can't still enjoy the game. I like hard games. I hope the game has difficulty tied to it. And this alpha version, I forgot to talk about that, by the way. I think the difficulty in this alpha version is higher than what I would expect. I'm not saying it's overwhelmingly high, although I would think that for a new player, it might be. Okay, and I also think about that as I am going through the combat encounters, is, am I finding this too hard, and would a new player find this too hard? Because there are certainly several encounters in this game which I think that's gonna happen. I don't want it to be overbearingly hard. I like having powerful stuff in the game, like the officers giving multiple turns. I wish I had a navigator. I don't think I'm gonna have one, sadly. But yeah, the game is enjoyable. The combat is enjoyable. For the majority of the things I saw in this alpha, I think it's enjoyable. And if the final release is anything like this, I think it's a game that I definitely can recommend. And it's a game that I am personally excited to see what else comes out when they maybe make a beta version of this, and especially when they make the final release. I will definitely want to play it, and it will definitely be a game coming out to the channel soon after it is released, if it is not super buggy. Because something that they tend to do is new Allcat games tend to be full of bugs, which I don't like, and it almost ruined my experience with Rogue Trader. So at times it's actually better to wait some time until they fix most of the more grievous problems and then play the game. But yeah, I am looking forward to it. I want to mention that if you liked this review, or maybe if you've seen my playthrough of Dark Heresy, and you liked what you saw and you also want to play this alpha version, you can do it. I'm not sure if I mentioned this at the start, but yeah, I'll make the same joke I would have made initially, which is you don't need to be a content creator or an influencer. You don't need to be the nephew of somebody at Allcat Games. What you do need to do is, if you pre-order the game, there are different types of pre-order you can make, like different tiers. You have the basic one, which is the cheapest one, where you get the base game and beta access, and then you have, I think, like 3 more tiers, with the last one being the collector's edition with a really cool statue of this lady here. I would like to have it, but it's very expensive. But yeah, it exists. And if you pick up the 3rd tier, which I think is double the cost of the base game, I think it's like 80 euros, you get a bunch of goodies, you get the beta access, and you also get the alpha access, which is what I am playing right now. I would say that if you really want to play Dark Heresy, you know, it's your money, you can choose what to do with it. I wouldn't say it's something you need to jump on right away. Okay, I wouldn't say that. It's like, personally, like I said, I'm not spoiling myself on the dialogue. I want to keep that fresh for a full playthrough on the final release. I have done this before on other games, and I ended up regretting it, which was playing through Baldur's Gate 3, for example, is a good example of this. Baldur's Gate 3, I played the beta version when it came out in October 2020, I think, and I played it and replayed it a couple of times because I really wanted more D&D in my life at that point. And then when the game finally came out, I still had fun, but it was mostly because I was doing the playthrough for the channel, because repeating that content all over again with nothing being fresh from almost an entire act, I kind of regretted playing through all of that before the final release. So yeah, if you really want to do it, you have an option that you can do it. If you are not that invested or that curious, I think you can just pass on that and, you know, just maybe see a couple of videos to watch gameplay if you want, and then just play the final release when the game actually comes out. Maybe even wait a little bit until the majority of the early release bugs are fixed. With that, my friends, I think this has been a long enough review. Like I said, I was going to ramble once I finished my notes there. I think I covered most of the topics that I wanted to cover. I know that in this video I did not add a lot of, well, almost nothing. I did not add combat encounters, I did not show quests and stuff unraveling, because I want to keep it as spoiler-free as possible in that sense. So if you are curious about seeing gameplay, seeing the things I talked about in this review, you have the playlist, you have my entire playthrough of first impressions of the game that you can check out for that purpose. Also, if there is something that I did not cover in the review, I'm sure there will be several things, leave a comment, you can ask whatever you want, and if I cover that, which I most likely did, you can ask and I'll try to give as much feedback as possible in a reply. With that said, we're gonna finish up this review. I hope it was useful. As always, I want to thank you all for being here with me in the channel, watching this review for the alpha version of Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy. I hope it was enjoyable. Questions, suggestions, your own opinions, leave a comment below. If you are enjoying this content, consider subscribing for more. Many more videos coming out soon. It is also a free and easy way to support the channel. I hope to see you all in some other video, my friends, and until then, stay safe, everyone.